is one of those passages, isn't it, that the minister, if he'd given it to anyone else, it would feel like a cruel and unusual punishment. With all of those names and places, it can feel quite detached, quite removed. And yet, my contention this morning, my hope is that you see there is far more going on in these verses. Remember, Jesus has said to his disciples in John 14 that in his Father's house there are many rooms. He says that there is a home that God the Father possesses that has more than enough space for all of his people. And Jesus goes on to say, doesn't he, that he has gone to prepare a place for you, Christian. If you are a disciple of Jesus, he has gone to his Father's house to prepare a place for you. Jesus has gone. Or, in the imagery of the book of Joshua, he has trod the waters of the Jordan. He has risen and ascended and has crossed safely into the promised land. He has defeated the enemies of God's people, sin and death, and he has prepared a place in his Father's house for them, for you. And as Jesus says in John 14, that one day he is coming back to take his people there. There is a home for us with God that awaits everyone who is called upon his name. And this enormous section, all the way from 13 to 19, this enormous section in the book of Joshua is here to help us wait well by preparing us for what is to come. The picture that God paints for us here in Joshua is to help us better understand life in the Father's house, the home that Jesus has prepared for you. Now, if that is something that you struggle with, to wait well, or something that you struggle with to think about how glorious the inheritance is, my prayer is that Joshua will help you. And so let's get stuck in, shall we? With our first heading. It's not on the service sheet, so if you are a note taker, here is our first heading: a home for the people of God. I didn't read it all, but I encourage you to read it all. All that section from 13 to 19, they give us page after page after page of details about the land. So verse 4, verse 6, verse 8, verse 9, they all mention the land being described. We didn't cover a lot of it, but all the geography, did you see? All of the contours of the land, its cities, its rivers, its mountains, its forests, even its livestock. And then it continues, filled with place names that we can't pronounce and villages we'll probably never visit, or actually can't go and visit because most of them aren't there anymore. And as you listen to the reading this morning, I kind of jumped in, deliberately not giving you anything to kind of help orientate you, because this is often how we feel when we read those texts. They feel so remote, so removed, and we think, why on earth is Adam reading this text to us this morning? Why does God think it's so important to clog up the Old Testament with all of these details? Why did he see it fit to preserve all of these details in his word? Well, to try and help us understand, I want you to imagine for a moment that we are sat in a solicitor's office. So for the kids, that's in a lawyer's office. You're sat in a lawyer's office, and you're sat with other friends and family, and you find out that a distant relative has died, and you're gathered really to see what will be inherited. The solicitor kind of makes a few initial comments about things that have happened in this person's life, describes a few things that they've done, and you think to yourself, wow, that's actually quite impressive. I wish I'd known them while they were living. They've done quite a lot. But then they come to reading out all of the property, all the things that are left, all the things that are going to be passed on from this person's estate. And your name is read out. And all of a sudden, your ears prick up because you go, that was an impressive person, but I've been sitting in the queue for a while. Lots of people seem to have got other things. And suddenly, you hear your name and what has been left to you. And the first thing that you hear is that you've been left enough money to pay off all of your debts, all of your loans, and not just all of your debts and all of your loans, but all the debts and the loans of all the people that you love. Then you find out that you receive a beautiful home. Of course, the mortgage is paid off. Then you find out that you don't just get one home, but that you have an incredible holiday home by the sea. And by the way, that house, it's also got a dock because there is a yacht that comes with it. And did I tell you about the car? Sorry, cars. You get the Rolls Royce, but that's just for the weekend. You've got the sporty one to ride around during the week. And you're sat there and your jaw just drops as all of this stuff is given to you. And you sit there and you go, are you serious? Like, all of this is for me. I get all of this. But I didn't do anything. Like, all of this inheritance is mine. You're mistaken, aren't you? There's no way that this is all meant for me. That is how every single person felt as they recognized the glories of the land that are being given to them. How every person in every tribe would have felt as the glories of the land that they were to inherit were described in intricate detail. You can imagine, can't you? Sorry, just tell me again. Just how big was the engine in that car? How many bedrooms? Did it really come with waiting staff, that holiday home? Like, are you serious? I don't even need to clean it. Like, tell me again. Like, tell me again of all that I'm going to receive. Like, it's too good. Like, imagine being sat there as part of the tribe of Benjamin and hearing the place that you now get to call home. Like, imagine being sat as the part of the tribe, the half tribe of Manasseh, and suddenly hearing it goes all the way to the Jordan. That's how far it extends. And how far the other way? Do we even get all the hill country too? Isn't that the place where the forests are rich and the rivers flow? You're telling us that is where we get to dwell. Why is this passage here? Well, if you think that the land is good, you will not believe what Jesus has secured for you. If you think this is great, the place in the Father's house that he has gone to prepare for you, it will not just make your jaw drop, but it will cause you to gasp forever and ever. It is here to help you see just how wonderful the place Jesus has gone to prepare for you. Paul tells the Corinthians, doesn't he? Like, no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. The promise of the home secured for the people of God by Jesus through his death and resurrection should fill us with the same sense of wonder that the Israelites felt as they heard about what they were being given. And imagine a world with absolutely zero trace of cancer diagnoses, of of cruelty, of addiction, of divorce, of floods, of war, of poverty, of hunger, of abuse, of lying, of gossip, of exploitation, of insecurity, a world free of jealousy, of loneliness, free of pornography, free of depression, free of suicide, free of broken families, free of broken relationships. We could go on, couldn't we? That is the world that Jesus will bring with him. That is the world Jesus has gone and prepared for his people. Jesus died so that you could be forgiven and have a place, a home in the Father's house. And he rose and ascended to guarantee that you will be there one day. But the other reason that this vast description is written here in extensive detail is to remind you that you are not yet home. You might be sat here thinking that, thinking that the world that I've just described, of course I want that. Of course I'd have my heart and my head set on that, and yet so often we act like we're home. The Christians in the New Testament, they're described by Peter as elect exiles, and James calls Christians the 12 tribes in the dispersion, pilgrims wandering through this barren land. We are in the same situation as God's people before they crossed the Jordan and entered into the land. We are wandering in the desert, but instead we often act like this is our home, like this is it. Imagine for a moment God's people in the desert before entering the home that God had promised and prepared for his people, saying, I think I'll stay here. I think this is fine. This will do. This is good enough. I'm happy with the wilderness, and I'm happy, like in my tent. I'm happy with just eating some manna and eating some quail. I'm content with the provisions that I've got. I'm happy in the wilderness when there is a world of rest waiting for them. But interesting, every time we cling to this world, desperate to make it heaven on earth, that is what we're doing. We are making home here rather than fixing our hope on the home that Jesus has prepared for us. Brothers and sisters, this world is passing away. The world is fading, and one day Jesus will come and roll up the sky like a scroll, and this world as we know it will cease to be as he ushers in the world remade. And so I want to urge you not just to gasp at the glorious inheritance that awaits the people of God, but to loosen your grip on this passing world. Don't let go of the promise. And don't get too comfortable here. Don't let go of Jesus, and instead hold fast to him by faith, for he's coming back for his people to bring us home. I was really struck chatting to different people this past week, and we ended up having conversations with people from different countries, and the things that people worry about being so different. Now, my caveat for this is it is a good thing to pay off your mortgage. It is a good thing to pay into your pension. It is a good thing to provide for your family. But when you are paying into your pension, do you see it as a temporary provision for some people, or do you see it as putting down roots as deep as you can to make life as comfortable here as possible? So often we hoard the things of this world to insulate us from suffering, but in doing so it numbs us from the glory that awaits the people of God. we look at the things of this life thinking, this is the best that God could ever have for me. And yet it pales in comparison to the beauty of the Father's house. And you sat thinking, and these people are worrying about pension contributions for ministers. And these people are worried about the penalties of prison for preaching Jesus. Jesus says, doesn't he, what good is it to gain the whole world in the wilderness and to forfeit your soul and a place with the people of God in the Father's house? This passage is put here to swell your heart and enlarge your eyes so that you can see the glory that awaits. Don't let your vision drop to the things of this passing world, but look to the glory to come. Here's my second of 2 points. What makes a house a home? What makes a house a home? We've just got a new doormat. And it does make it feel a lot more homely. It's a weird thing, isn't it? But when I arrived home after being away all week, was it the doormat that I was excited about? I mean, it'd have to be pretty special. No, it was not the doormat. It is the people that are inside that house. What makes a house a home? I wonder how you would answer that question. But I want to ramp it up. What makes this land so special? What makes the Father's house so special? It's interesting. We could have read so many of this, but I want to encourage you to read chapter 18 when you get home. Because out of all of the chapters in this section, it really gets to the heart of the allotment of the land. Some have actually argued that chapter 18 is really the heart of the whole of the book of Joshua. And the reason is because sandwiched between all the tribes of all the land allotted to Caleb on the one side and the remaining tribes, we have chapter 18 verse 1. We have what gives glory to the ground that God's people get to call home. What is at the heart of the home that God has given to his people? And let's just flick there. Chapter 18, if you have got your Bible. It's fascinating. In the midst of all of this, in completely unassuming language, just look down as we get to verse. Well, let's look at verse 7 of chapter 18. The Levites have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their inheritance, their heritage. And Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan eastward, which Moses gave to the servant of the Lord gave to them. The reason I think it's so fascinating is these are words that you could almost be forgiven for flicking over as you do your Bible in a year reading, as you're just powering through. And so you just got to get to the end of the page and turn it. But the beauty of the land presented is that God is there. God is there in the midst of his people, in the heart of the land. God dwells. And we can keep reading more. Look at verse 1 of chapter 18. The whole congregation of the people of Israel assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. and the land lay subdued before them. God is in the midst of his people. The tent of meeting, the tabernacle, the place which symbolizes God's presence with his people, is set up and set firm. It is set up at a place called Shiloh, which word comes from the word rest. The best thing about this place is in the land, God is at rest, and therefore so are his people. Like, what makes this land truly wonderful is that God is there. God is at rest in the midst of his people. And what makes this house a home is that God lives there. The Ark of the Covenant, the sign of God being with his people, had gone before them in the wilderness, led them through the Jordan. He's been with them at the head of the parade as it went round the great city of Jericho before God brought its walls come tumbling down. And now the presence of God, who has delivered them and fought for them, is now at rest in the midst of his people in a sign of permanence, permanent presence. Like when we read at the end of the Bible in Revelation 21 and the wonderful description of the world to come, or what it will be like, it's so easy to get caught up in the fact that there is no more pain, no more suffering, no more sadness, but to miss the most precious part. Hear what John says before he describes all of those things. Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. The most wonderful thing about the world to come, about the Father's house, is that you get to be with him forever. One theologian explains why this is so important by asking one very simple question. If heaven meant you were pain-free, if it meant that all that makes you sad disappeared, if every loved one you lost returned to you, if you had everything you could ever hope for, if you had all of these things, but God was not there, would you be satisfied? It is not wrong for the Christian to long for the remade world. But the reason we long for that is because we long to be where God is and his reign is realized. We long to be where God in all his glory is on full display to see. A helpful way to understand why this is so important in the end is to look at the beginning, isn't it? Just think of Adam and Eve in the beginning. Adam and Eve were in paradise, pain-free, blessed paradise. And Genesis 2 makes it clear that when God formed man from the dust of the ground, he placed him in this beautiful place, dwelling, secure. Language actually to make clear that is used often in Joshua to describe them returning into the place of God's paradise. Adam and Eve were surrounded by perfection. But the sad truth is they wanted the blessings of God, but not God. And they sinned. But our hearts are just like Adam and Eve so often, aren't they? We feel the tension in our hearts. We want the house God gives more than for God to be there with us. Jesus has gone to prepare a place for us in his Father's house. But I want to urge you, what should lift your spirit and stir your hope is that it is the Father's house, that he will be there and that everything good about that house flows from him. Just like everything good about this land here flows from God resting at the center. It's a silly thing, isn't it? The joke, men build houses, but wives make them worth living in. This is the truth, though. Christ has won us a place for it. But if he was not residing, it would not be worth going to. But before we close, I just want you to notice the verse that I read, verse 7. Such a striking verse, isn't it? Be honest. How would you feel after hearing all of these chapters? You're sat in the solicitor's office, hearing everyone getting inheritance. You think, wow, that mountain range sounds nice. Wow, those rivers and valleys, all the way to the Jordan, you say. Wow, they've done well. And it comes to you. Verse 7. The Levites have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their heritage. Honestly, how would you feel? They don't get a place to call their own in the land. Do you honestly feel like they're missing out? Do you feel like they've been shortchanged? I think that question is a really good test. If you were to find out that was your lot, would you be miserable? Would you be begrudgingly accepting? Or would you be overwhelmingly grateful that my inheritance is getting to be near God? They get to be near God, and there is nothing better. And I want to urge you, Christian, order your priorities. Don't have hands so full that you're not able to receive what Jesus has for you. What good is it to gain the world and lose our souls and the joy of standing in the Father's house? What inheritance do you want for your children? A pension pot, or knowing the one who made them and saved them? Are you homesick for this place? And are you homesick for the one who lives there? We have not crossed the Jordan, but Jesus has. We have not passed through death yet, but Jesus has. We have not finished our pilgrimage through the barren lands, but Jesus has. We are not able to rest from the work that God has given us to do in this fallen world, but Jesus has. Jesus was not joking when he said, in the Father's house there are many rooms, and that he has gone to prepare a place for you, and that he will come again to take you to himself, that where he is, we may be also. Brothers and sisters, you have a glorious inheritance awaiting you.